Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Attic, Executive Chairman of ID for Africa, and I'd like to welcome you to our 12th livecast episode, which is part of our Country Progress Report series and which will spotlight the Mauritius identity ecosystem. But before we do that, I'd like to share with you our pipeline for the upcoming 5 livecast episodes and call your attention to where we have open calls for participation. These calls allow us to survey the community for high-quality content and to broaden our panelist base. So please submit proposals where appropriate. Coming up next, on February 24th, we have infant identity management and the legal identity agenda. This livecast will examine what is needed to get identity right from the start, which includes policy discussions and an exploration of business practices and technologies, including the latest on infant biometrics and the traceability to the source through linkage with parents' digital IDs. This panel is now complete, but if you have anything to add, you can join the community voices during the event itself. Registration is open today. Please do not wait. Then on March 10th, we will commemorate International Women's Day, which falls earlier in that week, with a special session on gender matters in identity systems. We will have some research presentations on barriers to access and gender equity, followed by a panel on policy where we will invite representatives of the identity authorities in African countries to join the discussion. This session still has an open call for participation, which will close February 15. So please submit quickly if you like to contribute to this important topic. Operator, please add the link in the chat so that people can click on it and get the submission directly from the chat. Then on April 8th and April 29th, we will have part 1 and part 2 of a topic entitled Vaccination Certificates and Identity Management. This is an important topic, timely and controversial. We have opened a call for participation earlier this week, and based on the high level of interest and content quality, we think we will be running this as a series. We have not selected the final lineup, so if you have something pertinent to say, please let us know. This is open to everyone, including industry, development agencies, civil society, and government. Then on May 13, we have identity management and biometrics in elections in Africa. By and large, throughout the COVID pandemic, Africa has managed to respect the electoral calendar for the year without any hiccups. We will examine what's becoming the de facto standard for how to conduct credible and efficient elections in Africa. We will be opening a call for participation later in March, so please be on the lookout for that. We should be coming back in May as well with some new episodes in the CPR, the Country Progress Report series, so stay tuned for that. Before I forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and activate the bell so we can keep you informed throughout with some great content. Of course, we would love to have you participate live so you can be part of the dialogue as it happens through the chat, live question and answer, and community voices. Speaking of which, if you want to join the community voices, you can press the button to raise your hand on Zoom when I invite participation, and the operator can elevate you to the panel. Don't be shy, be pertinent and be heard. Vous pouvez également suivre cette session en français simultané en sélectionnant la chaîne française sur votre application Zoom. Back to today's topic, the Mauritius identity ecosystem. Mauritius may be a small country with a population of about 1.3 million people, but it has already dealt with some of the more intricate issues related to identity management, often encountered in countries with populations orders of magnitude larger than that of Mauritius. This is particularly true when it comes to legal issues and privacy, including constitutional questions surrounding biometrics. The very same questions that are now facing several countries around the world, including India, Nigeria, and Jamaica. Mauritius had to deal with these questions early on and has had to harmonize their identity management practices with a well-developed legal environment which continues to inform what can and cannot be done. The outcome is a performant and scalable identity ecosystem that has earned the trust of their citizens, in part because of the legal guardrails that balance public interest with personal rights as provided for by the Constitution and the Civil Code. Mauritius has also paved the way for its digital transformation with an ICT strategy anchored on digital identity that prepares the country for the 2030 objective of Digital Mauritius and the data-driven economy, all the while paying attention to governance and robust privacy and data protection laws. It is for these reasons that we have chosen to study the Mauritius identity ecosystem in the hope that through dialogue with the country's officials, we will document lessons learned that may be relevant for the development agenda in other countries. There is no shortage here, as you will see. Now, I'd like to welcome the distinguished panel for Mauritius. With us today, representing the various identity stakeholders, we have Mr. Gopaul, the Permanent Secretary from the Prime Minister's Office, Mr. Ayelou, Registrar of Civil Status Division, who's also the ID for Africa Ambassador, Mrs. Madhub, the Data Protection Commissioner, Mr. Dindoyal, who's Civil Status Officer, Civil Status Division, Mr. Hawabhay, Chief Technology Officer of the Ministry of Technology, Communication and Innovation, Mr. Hitto, Lead Analyst of the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, Mr. Valaydon, Dr. Valaydon, Acting Regional Public Health Superintendent from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Mr. Danish Juwaheer, Superintendent of Police, Mr. Ramlall, Chief Clerk, Representative Passports and Immigration Office, and then Mrs. Seewoo, who's the Principal Electoral Officer with the Electoral Commission. I want to thank the government of Mauritius, and in particular the Prime Minister's Office, for graciously accepting our invitation and for letting us explore with them the lessons that we can extract from their experience for the benefit of everyone else in Africa. Their cooperation has been exemplary, and the movement truly appreciates this kind of collaboration. I thank the panelists individually for taking the time to be with us today after the end of their workday. We recognize it's the evening in Mauritius, and your presence with us at this hour is a testament of your dedication to a good cause. So please accept our sincere thank you. Finally, before we start, I also would like to thank our development partners, the Gates and Omidyar Foundations, for their support and for making the live casts possible. We are going to start with a short video on Mauritius provided to us by the Mauritius Development Board, Mauritius government, to be followed by introductory remarks by Mr. Gopaul. Afterwards, I will ask Mr. Gopaul, Mr. Ayelou, and Madam Madhub to remain on the panel with me. We will bring in the other representatives back one by one as the session advances. We will start by exploring the foundational issues around identity, including the Constitution and the legal frameworks. We will then invite the Ministry of Technology to share with us how they are supporting the vision of digital identity in Digital Mauritius. We will then launch into a journey through the sectorial collaborations and use of identity in banking, health, law enforcement and immigration, and elections. Operator, at this stage, I'd like to ask you to launch the video to be followed by remarks from Mr. Gopaul.
Yeah, let me, first of all, in the name of Mauritius, thank ID for Africa and in particular to Dr. Atik to have organized this webinar, which will give us the opportunity to showcase the identity ecosystem of Mauritius. In fact, the whole team present today, we are very enthusiastic to share our experience with you. Apart from the PMO, which I'm representing, and the Civil Status Division, which is being represented by Mr. Ayelou, we are having representative from the different sectors involved in identity, which are going to share their experiences with you and the best practices with you. Now, I would like to give you an overview of the Civil Status Division and how it operates within the national system under the aegis of the Prime Minister's office. First of all, as you must have seen on the website of the Civil Status Division, the civil registration in Mauritius dates back to the 18th century. The Central Civil Status Office holds record as far back as 1811, and the older ones that are of interest are kept at the National Archives. The Civil Status Division offers a variety of service: registration of birth, registration of marriage between non-citizens and citizens of Mauritius, and between citizens of Mauritius as well. It also deals with the registration of death with the registration of religious marriage having civil effect. But the Civil Status Division does not operate in a legal vacuum. As you rightly said, Dr. Atik, it is supported by a legal framework, which consists of the Civil Status Act. We have also, as you said, the Code Civil Mauritius, and there is also the Data Protection Act, and as well as certain legislation which govern the flow of electronic data. So the Civil Status Division has been established under the Civil Status Act, which make provision for the above services and also makes provision for the powers and responsibilities of the registrar. It also makes provision for amendments of entries, change of name, and offenses and penalty under the Act. Given the importance of vital statistics, the Civil Status Division falls under the aegis of the Prime Minister's office. And the Honorable Prime Minister, who is the executive head of the country, is the minister to whom has been assigned the subject of civil status. But I must tell you also that the law is not static, because as and when required, different provisions of the Act are amended with a view to facilitating the work of the registrar and to adapt to new situations. For example, during this financial year, which ends on the 30th June 2021, several amendments have been brought to the Civil Status Act, such as it has been included in the Act the notion of audition, which empowers the registrar to carry inquiry with a view to discouraging and preventing fake marriages. We have amended the Act to empower the registrar to amend and rectify any civil status entry which involves a clerical, typing, or numerical mistake. This was not so before. It was rectifying any mistake. The onus was on the citizen before that. And this was quite difficult and cumbersome to them. One of the other amendment has also empowered the registrar to grant access to the CPD to any ministry or government entity in such a manner and to such an extent as he may approve. Now, a law practitioner cannot obtain civil status documents of a person without the prior approval of that person. This has been included because we have been receiving complaints from many citizens of Mauritius, which have told us that their data were being used without their permission. We have also amended the Act to make provision to cover the COVID period, because at a certain period of time, we were under confinement as well, and during which there was no movement at all. As regards budget, to be able to function in an independent manner, a separate budget is allocated to the Civil Status Division each year. Our financial year runs from the 1st of July of one year to the 30th of June of the next year. This includes, with regard to the budget, it includes both recurrent and capital budget. Capital budget is mainly concerned with the purchase of new equipment and the maintenance. Now, the Civil Status Division, in association with other stakeholders, mainly the Central Informatics Bureau, which falls under the purview of the Ministry of ICT, of which Mr. Hawabhay is a technical head. We have made several innovations to the CSD. For example, in 2013, the Mauritius National Identity Scheme has enabled the country to make a big leap forward. And now the country is equipped, the statistic system is equipped with a new Mauritius National Identity Card system, whereby smart ID cards are issued with chips and safety features. We have a certificate authority, which is meant for authentication purposes. And we have a CPD, which is the Central Population Database, which allows for the sharing of data through the information highway. The head office and the sub-office of the CSD, with the support of the Prime Minister's office and the CIB, that is the MTCI, is now fully computerized. There is an ongoing 7-year digitalization project to preserve records which are as far back as year 1811. And this computerization scanning project is expected to end in 2023. Presently, we are on our way to setting up an IT system together with the CSD and the CIB, so as to have a common database between the Passport and Immigration Office, the Civil Status Office, the Prime Minister's Office, and the Judiciary on certain vital data. With the assistance of the Ministry of ICT, the online application of birth and marriage certificates is now a reality in Mauritius. We are not static, as I told you, we are moving forward. During this financial year and the coming financial year, we are looking forward to revamp the whole MNIS scheme and to have it replaced with a state-of-the-art system by 2023 with more features and with enhanced security features. We are also, during this financial year, in the process of revamping the CPD, the central population database. And hopefully by next year or before next year, this will be completed. We are having at the Prime Minister's office, we have been setting up a committee which look together with the CSD and the MTCI, and we do co-op other members as and when required to review all the difficulties that are being faced by the CSD and to find solution to them. We're also setting up, we have already set up a complaints committee to come up with policy decision as and when required to rectify as and when there are problems. So these are, in a nutshell, an overview of how the Prime Minister's office is interacting with the CSD so that to permit the CSD to operate within the national system with a view to giving a better service to the citizen of Mauritius. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gopaul, for this wonderful overview. Operator, could you please bring in Mr. Ayelou and Mrs. Madhub to the panel so that we can build on the discussion on the general remarks that the Permanent Secretary has given. I want to start by focusing a little bit more on the MNIS, which is Mauritius National Identity Scheme. Just to be clear, is this voluntary or this is an obligation on every citizen? Could you please describe the scheme and explain what's the requirement to have it?
Mr. Ayelou, can I give you the floor?
Yes, sure, yes. Thank you, Mr. Gopaul, for this very good presentation on the ecosystem of Mauritius. Yes, I'm Ayelou William, Registrar of Civil Status. Yes, doctor. Under the MNIC Act, a citizen, when he turns to 18, he has 6 months to come to the MNIC unit. We have 3 actually in Mauritius. One in the capital city, that is Port Louis, one is Rose Hill, and one in the district of Flac, which is found in the east of the region. So 3 MNIC units. The person has 6 months to come to us to make his national identity card. So upon the first application, it is free of charge. The documents that the citizen has to bring is his recent birth certificate. Of course, if he's turning 18, he will not have any national identity card. It is first application. And then the documents, the extract of the parents. So we are going to process the application and give to the citizens in a very short time, because everything is computerized, a national identity card, which he can use in his life cycle. And the first issue is free of charge. So this is the situation. And if you allow me just to add also, now when the citizens turn to 80, we change the national identity card and we issue him with a new one, whereby we engrave the SC logo, that is senior citizen. And with that national identity card, the citizens can travel freely by bus everywhere in the country. Even he can use the light rail system, the metro, how we call it here, free of charge. So these are one of the benefits of having the national identity card in Mauritius.
Just to be explicit, lesson number 1, the national identity is required for everybody. So you require everybody to carry it and you require them to present it. This is not an optional or voluntary scheme.
Yes.
No, it's an obligation upon every citizen to have the national identity card as soon as they reach the age of 18.
The age of 18. Now, do you have to establish your legal status in the country before, like, for example, your citizen status, or do you have different categories? Do you have refugees? Do you have residents? Do you have, is there, since everybody who's 18 and over needs to have it, what categories does it cover?
It covers Mauritian citizens for the national identity card. For workers, they have a special card for them. Residence card, occupational permit card. There are special cards which are delivered to them by the police for them to be able to stay and function within the country.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what would you say the coverage in terms of the adult population of the MNIS, the National Identity Card? What is the coverage currently?
Yes, I think it's almost over 90%. Yes, only if you only if very small percentage of population who have not done the national identity card. Many of them are abroad, you see. So when they come back to Mauritius, especially those who have the youngs who have gone for university studied abroad, so they are not here. But for them, there is no penalty because it is an offense not to make your national identity card. Sorry. So they have what we call illegal excuse. So those who are abroad, or some people who are resistant, but this is a very small percentage. We have mass conversion here in Mauritius since 2013.
Okay, very good. So we have a mature scheme that is essentially reaching total coverage of the population. I'd like to explore the legal framework governing this scheme, but I'd like to do it in a historical context because bringing the story towards where you are today, that journey is very, very insightful. So correct me if I'm wrong. You started with the act was in 1985, ahead of many other countries. You had an act, 1985, which you amended in 2013. Is that correct?
No. Yes, the MNIC Act, yes. The Civil Service Act 1982 and the MNIC Act 1985. That's correct. Yeah.
Right. So the act, actually the amended act, obviously 2013, has one lesson that I like to share with our audience. The act basically said, it stipulates that the registrar of civil status, which is you, William, right, shall keep a register, electronic or otherwise, in which a citizen's particulars are recorded. Furthermore, Section 3.2 enumerates these particulars as follows: sex, names, and such reasonable or necessary information as may be prescribed regarding the identity of the person. I liked that language. The reason I like that language is because it does not say what technology. It does not say it should be biometrics. It just says necessary information as may be prescribed regarding the identity of the person. So I think I urge anybody who's building parliamentary acts to really focus on making the language technology neutral. Of course, you operationalize the National Identity or Civil Register Act regulation through a regulation. The minister would issue, or the Prime Minister's office will issue, and you will say, this is done through biometrics, which is what happened, right, in 2013. So far, so good, right? So you've got an act of parliament that basically said it's up to you to decide what these particulars are. Then in 2013, there was the regulation that came out and it said you must give fingerprints in order to get the smart card. So this was the first time where Mauritius went into the biometric era.
Correct.
Right? Okay, so all is well. It sounds like there's no, all standard. However, there was a constitutional challenge. Basically, Mr. Madhub, a Mauritian citizen, challenged the constitutionality of the 2013 Act as a legislative vehicle for the new smart card ID project. And basically, the plaintiff alleged several violations of his rights. Do you care to share this? Because there's a lesson here we're going to extract. First lesson we extracted was, don't specify the technology, specify in general words whatever is needed to identify the person. Second is, let's look at what happens when there is a constitutional ambiguity regarding the use of fingerprints. So Mr. Madhub challenged this act, and the way I saw it, reading the Supreme Court, he challenged basically the right to life, the right to liberty, which were dismissed very easily by the Supreme Court because there was just no argument. But then he alleged constitutional violations of privacy. So my first question is to Mrs. Madhub. Mrs. Madhub, the Constitution in Mauritius does not offer a guarantee, an absolute guarantee to privacy. How do you read the Constitution?
Thank you, Joseph. I'm very glad to participate in this webinar today. It's indeed an honor. And I would like to congratulate you as well on the well-organized webinar. So far, so good. Definitely. So our Constitution after, let me just put you back in history about the Constitution of Mauritius. As you know, it requires a three-quarter majority to be able to amend the Constitution, which is a nearly impossible task to speak in very common language. So basically, we have sections 3C, subsection 3, subsection C, and section 9 of the Constitution, which relate to the fundamental human right to privacy. And also very clearly elaborated in the Constitution, there is no such absolute right in our Constitution. There are always exceptions following each of the fundamental human rights, including the right to privacy. But if you read the Constitution, as you rightly pointed out, it relates to privacy of home and property, which is not related to privacy of an individual.
Right.
Already here, we have a major challenge in the Constitution relating to the constitutionality of the right to privacy as in the identity ecosystem concept. So this is why this argument couldn't be brought forward in court and even before the Privy Council. But how we at the local level, how we tackle the constitutional lacuna, let's put it this way, we adopted laws. Normally, as you know, in any constitution, these are called, let's say, biblical rights. That is, you need a foundation to support a constitutional right, which is a law, which is a legal framework. And in our context, the right to privacy is buttressed by the Data Protection Act, by the Civil Code, Article 22, and the value of the Civil Code in Mauritius, given the number of years or centuries that it has existed in Mauritius, is absolutely treasurable, which means of great value. And Article 22 says everybody has the right to respect for his private life. And we hold that in civil proceedings to be very, very much in perspective. But we have the Data Protection Act, and which is supporting the constitutional right to privacy. And I must say that this office exists basically since 2009. And since that time up to now, we have been able to develop two legal frameworks. There was the Data Protection Act in 2004, which came operational in 2009, and then subsequently was amended again in 2000, not amended, but revamped altogether, absolutely, and 2017, and came into force on the 15th of January, 2018. Let me just pause a little bit here on the Data Protection Act. How actually
we want to get into that in detail.
Right,
hold on to that thought. But yes. I want to guide the discussion towards another lesson that I wanted to explore. But definitely this is something we're going to get to it, and its relation to international standards, etc. Now, even though the constitutional right to privacy was not guaranteed, there was an Article 9 of the Constitution, basically the idea that when somebody coerces you to give your fingerprint, it's tantamount to a search of your physical body. So the court, as I understood it, ruled correctly that asking for fingerprints is tantamount to a search of your body, which is protected under Article 9. But under Article 9(2), basically, it's not an absolute right either, because public interest can allow for that. So, granted, there was no constitutional right for absolute privacy. However, you have the right to not be searched unless you have the consent, except if there is a public interest statement. Now, the problem that happens is that basically the court justified the taking of fingerprints, right? Because they said in the public interest, you're justified to take the fingerprints. However, the court was not satisfied that you were not creating a bigger problem by taking fingerprints and storing fingerprints. So the idea is, when we looked at the 2004 Act, which you mentioned just now, and you looked at the technology that was used to protect data, we would say, while the taking of fingerprints and the storage of fingerprints may not violate the constitutional right, you may lead to an exposure of the data security issues, data protection issues, which can lead to a bigger problem. And therefore, the court considered that a constitutional violation. So my question to you, to the panel, is you have built a new act, which is, it's got encryption in it, it's got security in it, it's got all sorts of things. And today the technology exists with the ICT people around, etc. Do you think if we revisited that subject, the position of the court could be different, allowing you to retain fingerprints? And I'll ask this for all three panelists.
Okay. May I, or will other people? Okay, thank you.
It's okay after you.
Thank you so much. Yes. So basically, I would seriously, if you ask me, Joseph, avoid the whole constitutional aspect relating to privacy. Let me explain to you why. Because we have strong legal frameworks. Data Protection Act. Why should we resort to constitutional issues which are very confusing in nature to discuss such a very, let me explain to you why I'm telling this. You have the MNIC Act. In the MNIC Act, you have clause like it should be in respect with Data Protection Act, right? The very fact that we have this in law suffices to say that the data protection principles are being applied and the right to privacy is being protected, irrespective of whether the Constitution allows it and which sections of the Constitution are being applied to. Why I'm saying this? Because we went through the Mahadeu case, we went to private counsel, and we saw the, let's say, the unclear aspects of constitutional provisions coming into play. So we can actually not resort to the Constitution in this particular scenario.
Right.
Yes.
Dridisha, 100%. You had a path that was a perfect path because you built the law, you were informed by the Constitution, and this case, to build the right laws. But we are looking at other African countries today who do not have the same frameworks that you have. Even India, the situation went to the Supreme Court. The constitutionality of Aadhaar was being challenged. Right now, we have the same situation starting in Nigeria. We expect another situation similar in Jamaica. And just for our audience, the Privy Council is not a body in Mauritius. The Privy Council has the ability to pronounce certain legal analysis that in the Commonwealth, in this bigger framework of law. I mean, it's a court based on London. And so it's interesting what they had to say, which was in agreement with what the Supreme Court had to say, but they're being looked at by other countries to say, while we agree, you gotta go with the Data Protection Act, the legal challenges that are happening around the world against identity systems are coming out in a constitutional manner. And those are leading to basically either paralyzing the project or slowing down responsible progress. And so, yes, I applaud Mauritius's act, and we're going to come back to that in detail. But there is a lesson that I'm trying to drive for other African countries that may be listening and will be listening on YouTube regarding how to deal with constitutional issues.
I agree.
But let me just point out, William and Mr. Gopaul, you take fingerprints, but you don't store them. Could you just please clarify what you do? Mr. Gopaul, you're muted.
We take fingerprints, but we don't store them.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
But doesn't that represent a challenge to the identity management? William, don't you need to deduplicate? How do you deduplicate records?
Yes, sorry, Joseph, to come back to your question to Mr. Gopaul. True, we do take fingerprints at the time of application, 4 plus the thumb, so
right.
10. And then when the code is being personalized, we delete the fingerprint. So it is not being, there is no backup. It's not staying in the server, in the system. However, we only keep the minutia. The minutia, we keep it just to help us to to prevent cases of usurpation of identity. If someone else try to usurp the identity of another person, so the minutia we can detect such
okay
case.
So you keep the minutiae in order to avoid deduplication of records. What format do you keep?
Excuse me. And the minutia is kept in the chip of the national identity card, which is in the possession of the citizen. Yeah, it's not in the possession of the government of the civil status division. You see, his information is with him, not in our possession.
I understand, but what do you do in order to prevent the duplicate enrollment of people? Because if somebody enrolled 5 years ago and they come today, you don't have any record of them. So how do you avoid the duplication?
But we can detect, because when you come, let's say if you lose your national identity card, there is a procedure. You have to restart anew. You will have to go to the police station for a police memo. So you need something in writing with the police. You need to bring your birth certificate, recent one, less than 3 months. If it's a lady, her marriage certificate, proof of address. But the document which you submitted to the national identity card unit was scanned for the first time you came to us. It is on the computer system, so we can compare the documents submitted. We have your photo, which stays in the database, so we can see whether it's you who is coming again or it is someone who is trying to impersonate you. So we have this information stocked in the MNIC system.
Yeah, the fact that you have an obligation to have a national identity card, and when you lose it or it is lost, you have an obligation to apply for a new one. There is no way out.
Yes.
Right. So that's the trick. The trick is basically the obligation to have it, and therefore you don't need biometrics to deduplicate. That's the point.
No.
That's the point. Unfortunately, this is not going to be the experience in other countries because they rely on biometrics to do the deduplication. Yes. And in order for them to ensure uniqueness of the identity, which is for you can rely on the civil register even to just say administratively, these people have to have at 18, within 6 months, they have to have entered the national ID. So biometrics is not that important for you.
It's not really a problem not to have it. Yes, right. It's not really a problem for us because of a well-organized system. The civil, the CSD system and the central population database contain all the required information of the population, which you can check, cross-check.
Okay. Now, let me ask Rudisha. Rudisha, do you see a different treatment by the law, whether it's the Constitution or whether the Act, between fingerprints and between photos? Or Mr. Gopaul, whoever needs to answer that question.
She's in a better position. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rudisha.
No, definitely I'm speaking only from a data protection perspective. And if you look at the Data Protection Act, biometric data is considered as sensitive data, which is given a higher status than any like normal data, like a photo or any other, normal, ordinary categories of data. So obviously, when we're talking of biometrics, the obligations that are imposed on the Registrar of Civil Status and the other stakeholders are higher, and they require more attention and definitely more care with regard to the application of the principles in the Data Protection Act. I will not state that all the provisions in the Data Protection Act, when breached, actually amount to offenses, and they are prosecutable by this office if there is any breach. So basically, definitely it's very serious.
But do you consider for in today's environment and technological development, a facial photo is as good as a biometric in some contexts as fingerprints. I mean, you don't consider face as a biometric?
Definitely what we consider biometric data is facial recognition, iris, and all these technologically applied solutions to our personality. And this is defined in the Data Protection Act. That is, if you want me to give you the definition of biometric data, it says any personal data relating to the physical, physiological, or behavioral characteristics of an individual which allow his unique identification. In that case, definitely the fingerprints that are being stored or that are being used for the process of the smart ID is actually biometric data, and it falls within the definition in the DPA.
But what about the face? Because now I'm confused. You are still storing the face, but not storing the fingerprints.
Exactly. We have two categories of information. The name, the photo are actually personal data in the DPA, whereas the fingerprint is biometric data, and they have two different categories of treatment under the DPA. Definitely these information, which we call basic information, like the photo and the name, are given protection, but the protection required for biometric data is actually higher than for these basic information. And that's why the Data Protection Act makes the distinction between personal data and special categories of data, which are actually sensitive data and includes biometric data, genetic data, etc., etc.
But do you think this position will have to change? Because we are getting to a point where a facial image is all you need in order to identify somebody out of millions and millions of people. In a way, the fingerprint would not be really needed anymore. So where do you draw the line? Because if the question is to identify the person, facial recognition is as effective as fingerprints, especially as it advances in the technology. Do you think you would need to revise that position?
In the context of a chip or a smart ID, definitely the facial recognition techniques that are being used, they fall within the biometric data. But if we are looking just at a photograph, let's say in a population database, we're dealing with just a photograph, and it's not a facial recognition technique used to identify the person, which is a big difference. I take your picture, and that is fine. It's just a picture. But I use a technique to facially recognize you. That's a different aspect that we have to look into. And there's a big difference between the two. So that's
just to explain to the audience, there is a difference between the photo of the face and the face print, which is basically the template of the face that's extracted for the purpose of doing face recognition. And by the way, I'm insisting on this point because this is the same debate that everybody's having. The United States is having, everybody in the world, that you cannot prevent photos from being in databases, but you can prevent them from being in face recognition databases. So there's a distinction. And I think there needs to be a clarification regarding that I think at some point the law might have to be sort of amended slightly to make that clarification, because it's at a time when face recognition, for example, the BIPA law in Illinois, the BIPA law in Illinois was interpreted early on wrong by lawyers representing big companies, that it does not apply because otherwise we would not be able to store images of faces. But the courts, the circuit courts, have basically said no, because these images could be used to extract face, and that's actually the processed product that is becoming controlled by the law. So we have to be careful about what we're covering. Okay.
I'll just add one point to clarify this debate, just because our Data Protection Act, as you know, Joseph, is inspired from the EU General Data Protection Regulation and Convention 108. Why? And this has been very clearly debated before to actually make the distinction clearer. So our Data Protection Act actually caters for biometric data, including facial recognition. There is no problem with the definition of biometric data for us to revisit the law, because we just revisited this concept and we have included facial recognition in the biometric data definition. So we are quite comfortable with the law as it is right now.
Okay, let me go back to the fingerprint template, and that's to Ayelou and Mr. Gopaul. Since you're storing the template, you clearly must have decided on a format of the template. What is the format and how do you deal with interoperability? If in the future you change.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat again? Sorry, Joseph.
Yeah, so the template, since you're not storing the image of the fingerprints, you're only storing the template. What format is the template stored in?
But you know, we are on the project of revamping the system.
Okay.
So the civil status database, the central population database, tenders are already out. So consultant will be advising us on the way ahead, because the civil status database dates back from 2001 and it has to be revisited. I think Mr. Gopaul talked about the revamping.
In fact, I can say that template does not fully depend on us. It depends on technology, advancement in technology, and what are we going to get as new infrastructure. We are in fact revamping the whole system, and by 2023, we are supposed to have a new system with a new template, with added security features, and with added programs on them.
Okay, so basically you will end up using maybe standards-based templates, so it's interoperable, so you don't rely on a single vendor. You may even consider doing match on card. Would you be interested in considering match on card so that you don't need the template to move out of the card? It just does, or has there been no decision yet in terms of that architecture?
We have not yet decided on the architecture. We need to have wide consultation with all our stakeholders first, and this is being carried out by Mr. Hawabhay at technical level.
Yes.
Following this, we need to take a policy decision. By government need to take a policy decision, and then it is only then that we can decide on what we really need for the country.
So today the minutia on the card is not yet used to conduct transactions, but in the future you would need to use that minutia, right? Yes. There's a question in the audience: what is the minutia or template in the card used for?
Yes, it is for the Mauritius National Identity Card Unit itself. It is internal. Right. It is not meant to use in the private sector. You see, there are projects coming, for some card, but the card to be used in the private sector for other purposes, for other services. But for the time being, it is being used only to process an application.
There is one more thing I wanted to add. As of now, everyone having above 18 or 18 need to have a national identity card. And if you don't have it, there is no transaction that you can do without your identity card. You can't do any banking transaction. You won't be able to have a good treatment at hospital level. You won't have social benefits. It is only on the presentation of the national identity card that you'll be able to live properly.
Right. So you use it as essentially as a token to show that. Right, but you don't do match on card, or you don't do electronic yet matching.
Not yet. We are coming with it. We are coming with that.
Yes,
okay. So in your roadmap, you are going to address the issue of the template standard, and you're going to address the issue of where the template matching for authentication will take place, and then maybe there will be an API that you will publish and support your other partners. I assume that's under the plan.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that sounds good. So basically, Dridisha, we're going to come back to the law and its relation with the European, because that's an interesting element. But I want to wrap up in this area. Is there anything else you would like to say regarding the maturity of the legal framework covering the MNIS?
Actually, sorry, addressed to me.
To anybody on the panel, all three of you.
Yes. Yeah.
Mr. Gopaul
Maybe.
first,
Sorry.
Now, you know,
Yes.
our legal framework is not a static one. This is a dynamic legal framework that we are having. And we try to adapt our legal framework with the need and the difficulties that people have. That's why almost every year we try to amend the law. If I'm not mistaken, the Data Protection Act has also been amended recently to adapt itself to the needs of the people. So what is more important to us is what the people need, the need of the people within a proper legal framework.
Yeah.
Okay, so dynamic is very important. Don't expect the law to last 10 years. It most probably will evolve because the world is evolving. William?
Yes, Doctor. I wanted to give the guarantee that in Mauritius itself, I'm talking about the Civil Status Division. Data, is very well protected in this country. The Registrar of Civil Status is also the data controller. Once you give me your data, there is no way I can share your data, without your consent, without the permission of the data subject itself. Even within government sector, to be able to be connected with the information highway, which Mr. Hawabhay will develop later on, every government department or ministry has to be registered with the office of Mrs. Madhub, the data protection office. So without a certificate from the DPO's office, even if it is a public sector, a government organization, we are not going to give data, we do not share data. Just to give you how strict the law is. Also, regarding birth certificate, you can only apply for your birth certificate if you're civilly married, that of your spouse, for your children, ascendant and descendant. There's no way we're going to give you the civil extract of your brothers, sisters, cousin, auntie, etc. It's all being so well locked in a legal framework where data are very well protected.
Okay, we're going to come back to the subject of data sharing because that's an important information highway. So hold on to that thought.
Sure.
Did you want to wrap up on this topic?
Very quickly, I so much agree with what my other colleagues have just stated. And I can tell you that we work in very, very strict collaboration together. Mr. Ayelou can confirm that. We have so many issues that the Data Protection Office tackles, probably on a monthly basis, together with his office relating to data protection. And we have a very good collaboration. I can tell you that this is making data protection even stronger in Mauritius. Thank you.
Okay, good. So before I move to the next module of a discussion, I want to sum up some advice or lessons learned. Even though we learned them from you, they are no longer applicable to you. So Mauritius has already gone beyond that, but they're applicable to others because they are still in the early stages where you were back in 2013, 2015. So our advice to the identity authorities who are developing ID systems that require biometrics, I think you should first start by examining, if you want to avoid a challenge in the Supreme Court, start by examining if your country has an absolute constitutional right to privacy or not. If it understand that derogations allowed, under what circumstances are you allowed, or there's permissible interference with that right. Document how the capture and retention of biometrics, including fingerprints, can support the argument that the interference is allowed in a democratic society in the public interest. Document, for example, how much identity fraud and duplicate applications are costing society in democratic process, in cost to management, how SIM cards have been linked to identity or not linked to identity are leading to crime, etc. It was interesting to read in the court documents that there was a documentation that there were 700 cases of fraud that were documented as a result of not having controlled the enrollment through fingerprints or through other means. And so the court viewed that a legitimate reason to allow the derogation. Then for African countries that are continuing on this journey, make sure that data protection regulations and cybersecurity measures are very strong. Encryption and anonymization, perhaps distributed storage instead of central storage, so hackers cannot simply attack and steal everything. So you're not ending up creating a bigger problem for society in the case of a data breach, that they would rob you of the permissibility of the storage. And then also consider the scheme being voluntary, so there is no potential of saying that there's coercion involved. Therefore, people are giving their consent to provide that data. This is a delicate question, whether it should be voluntary or should be a requirement. Countries have different laws. Some are making it, like you, a requirement. Others are basically saying, we're going to deliver services for you. So in order to do that, for example, in Morocco, in order for you to receive services, you should register in the central national population register, and that will give you social protection services, etc., etc. Anyway, so your story and your constitutional analysis on biometrics is very useful. You've outgrown it, but others are looking at it and to see how that would be impactful. We're going to move away from data protection for a second, and then move to the description of the link with civil registration. With William and Mr. Gopaul, if you can explain to us identity right from the start, how does the civil registration process work in Mauritius, and also talking to us about the coverage and how you achieved it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Want me to start, Mr. Gopaul?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll supplement if required.
Yes. The coverage of the CRBS in Mauritius. Well, I'm very pleased to inform that in Mauritius we have 100% coverage of civil marriages and death registration, and for birth it is almost 100%. For birth registration itself, the applicant has to produce, when we take down a birth registration, the parents coming to declare the birth of their child have to bring to us a very important document called the notification of birth, which is being issued by the hospital or private clinics and signed by a medical practitioner, of course. And then we are going to take down the declaration of birth. Once it's being done, there is a unique national identity number, an NIN, that is generated. It is computer generated. So as from birth, the child will have a national identity number, which he's going to use throughout his life cycle. And coupled with that, at the time of declaration, the parents has a cash give voucher for them to open a bank account for the child. You know, this is the government incentive, maybe for parents who have more children, and also for the child to learn what is saving is, to have a bank account. You see, it can be viewed this way also.
How significant is it? I mean, by the way, this is a lesson learned. I mean, we've seen in countries where you give people some reward, either to register the birth or register the death, people do register. So how significant is it? Is it something that's like a 1 week salary, or is it the average person? How significant is it?
Well, honestly, it's not a big figure. It's not like a 1 month salary. However, it's not only the cash gift voucher, because the facilities that the mother has in the hospital, you know, the health services, you know, when it goes to labor to get the child, or everything is free of charge. So we stay in hospital, all you know, for the vaccine, or for the doctor, the gynecologist will see her. All these services is free. So these services also help the mother and the child also to be born in very good condition. You see, in safe condition.
And there are certain social security benefits that a single mother also do get with the children as well, up to, if I'm not mistaken, the age of 13. Social security benefits.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Gopaul, how much do you think culture plays a role? Because it seems that your society has been well-organized administration. You got a well-developed administrative sector in the government, and people have the habit of interacting with the administration. How much do you think this is playing a role in the mind? Like, people don't question again 1 second that they need to register.
I would say it's culture. I would say it's more education. We have an educated population, and that's what makes the difference. I think so.
But basically, you're educating the public about the importance of being registered.
Yes, and this includes civic education as well.
Where does this education take place? Does it take place at the schools? Does it take place in public centers, in television? How do you educate?
Everywhere, from school, in public center, in hospitals, in social security offices, everywhere. And even at home with the parents. Because if you have educated parents, then it's become easier for the children to understand their civic obligation, their civic rights as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to actually see, we've got somebody who wants to join the community voice. If it's a quick one, operator, could you bring that person on the community voice before we move on to the next section? And then I'd like to come back to Drodisha to talk a little bit about the new law. Operator, is there a? I see hands risen, and we're trying to bring them on board for the community voice. So education is important. You've got basically a point of contact with the population. It's not a single channel. You've got to use everything that's available to keep that being reinforced, and the importance of registration. Okay, as I don't see
sensitization, yes. I mean sensitization.
Sensitization. Okay, sensitization. Excellent. Okay, so very quickly, let's start with. I'm not sure if I'm spelling pronouncing your name, Khadijatu. Please unmute and ask your question quickly. Unmute.
Ah oui, ok. Bonjour à tout le monde. Bonjour, Dr. Atik. Donc, je vois que l'humoriste a fait beaucoup de progrès en ce qui concerne l'identité et je les félicite pour cela. Mais j'aimerais bien... Okay.
Khadija, on va avoir un interprète, comme ça, oui. Vous pouvez parler lentement et arrêter, comme ça, l'interprète va traduire en anglais. OK?
D'accord. Donc, je voulais juste revenir sur le secrétaire au niveau du ministère de l'Intérieur. Je vois que
I just wanted to get back to the secretary, considering the Ministry of Interior.
Donc, je vois que l'état civil est directement lié au ministère de l'Intérieur et que c'est au niveau du ministère que toutes les questions de l'état civil sont prises en charge. Je voulais savoir, est-ce que...
I can see that all the civil registry is linked to the Ministry of Interior and to the inscription of registration of people.
Donc, je voulais savoir, est-ce que cela a toujours été comme ça ou bien c'est une évolution que l'île Maurice a eu à avoir?
Has it always been like that, or is that an evolution that the Mauritius had to have?
La deuxième question, c'est par rapport au financement. Je vois qu'il y a beaucoup de financements qui sont prévus pour l'état civil. Est-ce que c'est des financements sur fonds propres ou bien c'est par rapport à des bailleurs de fonds?
The other question regards the financing, and I would like to know if it's a public financing or private financing.
Et par rapport à l'évolution de la loi, je vois qu'il y a eu beaucoup d'amendements et d'évolution du cadre juridique. J'aimerais savoir quels ont été les acteurs qui ont porté ce changement-là.
Also, regarding the law, I can see that there were many amendments to the law. So which are the actors that actually have driven those changes?
Je vous remercie beaucoup et merci de m'avoir donné l'occasion de m'exprimer.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Je vous remercie. Yes, the Civil Status Division has always been under the aegis of the Prime Minister's Office. As regards the budget, it's public fund. We don't have recourse to private fund at all for financing the project and the capital and the recurrent budget of the Civil Status Division. So it's more public fund that we used. Now, regarding amendments to the law, we have a committee at our level. We meet. We don't bring amendments to the law just like this. We bring amendment to the law after wide consultation and through experience gathered from the different sectors. For example, we have to liaise with the State Law Office. We have wide consultation with the team of Mr. Ayelou. We had wide consultation, for example, with the Financial Intelligence Unit, with the Bank of Mauritius, with the CIB, Central Informatics Bureau of Mr. Hawabhay. It's after wide consultation with all the stakeholders that any amendment to the law is brought. And how we bring about the amendment, it's not a straightforward process. Bringing amendment means that we need to go to cabinet first. We'll have to go to cabinet, and then the law is introduced in the National Assembly to be adopted. It is only when the law is passed and proclaimed that the amendment come into force. So it's not a straightforward process. There's a lot of discussion. Sometimes we propose amendments which are not accepted at highest level, at policy level, and most of the time our amendments are passed, are agreed upon, because these are amendments which come through consensus.
Mr. Gopaul, following up on that question, who are the stakeholders that bring together the need for amendment? Somebody needs to mute their basically, does civil society participate in the process of bringing change to laws? They bring to your attention a certain need that's not being addressed by current laws. How do you engage with the stakeholders?
In fact, we engage through the citizens directly, through the office of Mr. Ayelou, through the NTCI, through the FIU. There is no engagement of NGOs as such, but we take into consideration what we read in the newspapers, what people say, and information from different stakeholders.
Okay.
We take into consideration public opinion before bringing any change. For example, recently we had a meeting with the Chambre de Notaire, which has come up with a few proposals, and which we are taking into consideration for future amendment to the law.
Okay. So you do engage with special interest groups or representatives of civil society. Exactly. Yes. Okay. Okay. William, you had something to say.
Yes, just to add up to what Mr. Gopaul is rightly saying, we amend the law, from day-to-day experience, complaint from members of the public, as Mr. Gopaul was saying. I give you just two examples. Someone queried me as to why did I give his civil extract, his birth certificate, to an attorney without his consent.
Right.
Attorney is a legal professional. They used to write. And then this question was very pertinent. And then we went to the state law office for advice, and it was recommended that in future that we need that the legal professional must produce a written consent from the data subject. So consequently, we amended the law to bring that provision. Another good example was regarding acknowledgement. Normally, how it happens. Any person can come to the civil status office to recognize a child, but without the consent of the other party. That was not good practice. And then we had complaints, so we amended the law, which now, from now on, to recognize a child, if the father comes to recognize his child, the consent of the biological mother has to be obtained, So as we move along, we complete experience, as Mr. Gopaul was saying, so we have consultation with stakeholders if we want to amend the Civil Status Act, and this has a bearing on the Health Act. So we need to talk to our colleague from Ministry of Health. Just to clarify. Thank you.
So the laws are dynamic, as Mr. Gopaul has said, and you need to continually listen to the needs. Drisha.
I just want to take a relay to what Mr. Ayelou has just said. These complaints came to the Data Protection Office, and then they were sent to the Registrar of Civil Status. And as you see, that collaboration here, and we inquired, and then actually the law was amended. Just to tell you how we work in Mauritius and how the results are actually very productive. And there was no need to go for prosecution. We had a very good collaboration. And here we go. And the law was amended to cater for these problems.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Bernard Garcia, could you please introduce who you are and your participation question?
Thank you, Dr. Ratik. Thank you for introducing me to this event. This is my first time joining here. My question is, as I listened earlier, about your constitutional rights that you have mentioned before, that as long as the biometric is not violating or creating a big problem for the identity or privacy rights of individual. My question is, well, I congratulate the, first I congratulate the Mauritius for their initiative for this kind of protection of identity for your citizens. My question is, are you open to, or are you limited to these current modalities like fingerprint, facial recognition? Are you limited to those modalities, or are you open to have a new modalities that could help securing the identity of your citizen?
I don't think there should be any. We're open. We're open. We listen to people. Whenever there is need to bring any change, if we see that it is justified and it is in the advantage of the citizen of Mauritius, I don't think there should. And if there is consensus, then policy decisions are taken and the necessary amendment are made.
But Bernard,
Yes,
sorry, Mr. Gopaul, but Bernard, as you've seen, I highlighted the fact that the law was not specific to technology. The acts are always done in a way that says any such thing that's needed to identify a person. So it does cover any future technologies that might be. This is the wisdom of trying to be technology neutral in creating acts. Let the regulations specify, but the acts should not be dependent on any technology. So anyway, thank you, Bernard, for that contribution. I want to continue quickly. How about mobile plans, mobile ID? Any plans for introducing mobile identity in Mauritius?
This is a good question. I think Mr. Hawabhay may have thrown this idea, but we are moving into IT technology very gradually. We don't want to rush into anything, but if the time comes to introduce mobile technology, we're going to introduce it.
Okay. So at the moment, you don't have mobile ID, but you might be looking to introduce it.
But then, you know, there was one point in time, if I can call it mobile ID, during the COVID confinement, where people used to move around using a mobile work access permit. The access permit were on the mobile, and this was screened by the police to allow them to move. Most probably, Mr. Juwaheer would be able to give you some more insight on this at a later stage.
We'll come back to that. Operator, could you bring Mr. Dindoyal to the panel, because we want to talk about the digital identity, which is coming from your unique ID number. We want to understand what is the Mauritius unique ID number, how is it structured, etc. And I understand Mr. Dindoyal is the expert that works with Mr. Ayelou in the Prime Minister's office. So Mauritius has a digital identity in the form of a unique identifier. So could you please explain how people are identified through a number?
So before we begin, I'd like to thank Dr. Joseph and ID for Africa for the opportunity, and a hello to everyone. It is an honor to be among you today, and hopefully the discussion will inspire us all in our endeavor to transform our economy and ensure its prosperity. So the journey of a unique identity of a citizen was initiated by the Ministry of Social Security since 1986 in Mauritius. So a 14-digit algorithm was designed, and citizens who had attained 18 years old were manually allocated ID number based on same. However, the ID card issued was not of a laminated type with Polaroid photograph, having no chip or safety features, therefore not digitalized. However, since 2001, a computerized civil registration system ensured that a citizen's data was digitalized and had a unique identity number upon registration of each birth in Mauritius. Then, since 2003, the responsibility to allocate a unique identity was entrusted on the Civil Status Division when it was decided to tie the act of registration of birth of a Mauritian with a unique identification number made possible through a computerized registration system and stored on a central population database, whereby the latest update of a citizen is kept in order to facilitate sharing of data. So in 2013, a major shift happened. The Mauritius National Identity Scheme has enabled the country to be equipped with a comprehensive scheme as a complete solution for identity management. So the country was equipped with a Mauritius National Identity Card Unit and system, a certificate authority, a new central population database, a shared infrastructure network, and info highway hub. So this new ecosystem has enabled Mauritius to open the doorway to a purely digital identity and produce smart ID cards. Also, it's noteworthy to say that in 2013, there was a data governance also, and frameworks and processes were designed so that the country was able to produce clean data for its citizens.
Okay.
So standards and format were defined. The sources from which we were going to extract the information were defined. And also the definition of exceptions also were documented. Okay. So the key here is that the process is as important as the technology itself. So
okay.
SOPs were defined, steps were clearly broken down to manageable extent. And in the course of the ID card conversion exercise, we noted also that 90% of the people registered were handled using standard operating procedures. Only about 9.9% were defined under exception handling, and about 0.1% were defined under very exception handling. For example, impersonation cases or person alive having death records.
Right.
So these are the statistics that we have.
Now, this is wonderful. I think understanding the process and its importance. But explain to us the logic behind attributing 14-digit, as you mentioned, 14-digit unique ID number for the citizens. This is an important question, and then I'll come back to Madhub and understand her view of that number. Okay.
Right. So as I said before, it was started in 1986. Okay. So the ID number uses an algorithm using 14 characters. Okay. We started like this, and it was attributed based on the input of the following. So the surname of a child, the first character of the surname, the date of birth, the month of birth, the year of birth, and a civil status code or the registration code where the birth is registered, and a folio number or serial number on the birth certificate, followed by a computer generated checksum.
So it's not a random number. It's not like India where it's a random.
No, you had to key in all the numbers.
Right. Okay. So hold on to that thought. Mrs. Madhub, what does it bother you that it's not a random number?
No, not at all. Actually, when you look at all this information that is required, we actually checked whether these informations were necessary for the purpose that is being carried out. And it was prior consultation with the Data Protection Office that these information are justifiably required by the civil status for the production of the algorithms. And they were, I think, yes, they don't have to be random. Random actually has an element of insecurity in it, Joseph, that we might encounter. So to avoid this problem, I would rather go for the solution that is being proposed right now.
Okay, so even though I could read from the number some aspects of this person, like their date of birth and the first letter in their surname, that doesn't bother you that it discloses information?
Not at all, because they are all public information, by the way. Date of birth, they are all public information in Mauritius, and all public information, and there is no problem with that. It's already something that everybody knows. What is your date of birth? And so we have no issues on data protection.
Okay. Now, is this number, William, coming back to you, is this number also used in other sectorial, I mean, is it recorded in your health records? Is it recorded in any other context, or this number stays only within the civil status division? How wide is this number? Unmute, William. William, unmute.
Yes, yes, sorry. Yes, I'm back with you now. So I was saying this number, you carry this number since your birth, and it doesn't change. We have rules, we have the law where we can cancel a national identity card, but this is not the issue tonight. This is a unique number which will not change until there is need for it. And behind the verso of the card, there is also a CCN number, card control number, which is also a reference. And this has helped us a lot during the confinement period to give assistance, financial assistance. We have the MRA providing this CCN number.
So it is universal, this number, and forever, from birth to death,
sure.
You will be using it. You open up a bank account, they will use that number.
Yes, yes. You go to school, your birth certificate, everywhere. You buy property, every business transaction is being used.
Okay. So let's keep moving so we can get in the other members on the panel. Mr. Dendrial, thank you so much for this perspective. I'd like to bring in the ICT Ministry, Hawabhay, Mr. Hawabhay, to join the panel. Can you bring hello? Good to see you again. Obviously, all of this cannot happen without a well-designed strategy on basically data storage, security and sharing, and also the infrastructure to support all of this. What role does the ICT Ministry play in this identity ecosystem?
Right, thank you, Dr. Atik. I'd like, first of all, to thank Dr. Atik and also the ID for Africa team for organizing this event, which is very much an important event for us to share about the Mauritian experience. Yes, the ID project that we have been doing at the Civil Status Office and the Prime Minister's Office, it relies a lot on the ICT infrastructure that we have in place. In fact, the Ministry of ICT is here to promote the development of ICT in Mauritius in terms of infrastructure, in terms of culture, in terms of education, and in terms also of securing data and all with cybersecurity. So Mauritius is a country today that has fiber to the home. We are fully covered with fiber to the home. It is 100% coverage over the island. And we are connected to the world also with 2 submarine cables. So a third one is coming. So the infrastructure part is already there. And then the Ministry of ICT, through the services of the Central Informatics Bureau, which is the CIB, which is the project management arm of government, comes in to conceive the project and to help and bring to fruition the project and all. So this is the facility that we give to all ministries and departments, and obviously we have assisted the NCB. But I'd like also to add that as part of the infrastructure, government has set up a data center. So yes, we have our own data center, the government data center, which is what we call here the government online center. So it is that infrastructure that is very secure, has the resources in terms of human resources, in terms of equipment, in terms of technology, to manage and to provide services to everybody. We provide services to the Ministry of the Prime Minister's Office. We also host systems for the Treasury accounting system, for education, for all sectors, government sectors. We provide that service, and it is through all this that we are able to service the Prime Minister's Office.
So lesson learned, I mean, you recommend that the government national identity data and the civil register data be secured centrally by an ICT Ministry data center, so that you leverage synergies among different sectors.
Sure, and definitely, we will recommend going that road, because what happens is that there is these dedicated ICT resources,
Right.
professional resources that can support the system and the yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so just so we can quickly pick up speed, what do you think about PKI and digital signatures, and where do they play in your infrastructure? And this, William and Rajneesh, you can both contribute to that. So where do you see PKI going? Some people in Africa are saying this is too complicated. We don't need it. We can use online verification directly. So for security, we could just put the information on a piece of paper, and then we go online since you're connected fiber to the home. So is there a PKI in your future?
Definitely. In fact, as Mr. Ayelou and Mr. Gopaul were saying, the data that is on the card is digitally signed. In fact, they have been signed by a CA, a certification authority within the MNIS project, and this is part of the exercise. So why we have introduced the CA is to give trust, because the important thing is not just capturing data. The important thing is not just putting the data on the card, but it is also to give trust to the people who are holding the card, that they can transact with it, because this data comes directly from the civil status office. It has not been tampered. It is not something that people have made a fake data. So you can trust the whole system and trust the whole infrastructure for which we are giving the service.
But in the future, if you see online authentication taking place, do you think the PKI importance becomes less? For example, India may be going down the path of live authentication instead of using a PKI, which secures the card or secures the transaction.
In fact, there will be a mix, because Mauritius also, we are going on the live authentication. In fact, we already have the MOPAS, which is the National Authentication Framework. So when you want to transact with government since December last, now you have your identity being secured with two-factor authentication, one-factor authentication through the NAF. But here the digital signature comes, digital certificate comes to give non-repudiation, because this is the most important. So the authentication is important, but we also need to confirm, because what is important, you look at the data that is there, you will see that it has been signed by the civil status office. So this is important. It's the organization, and that can only be given through a CA. So there is room for both technologies, both initiatives to thrive, but we need to see how we balance both and give a better service to our citizens.
Okay, just a quick question before we go into banking and finance. What are your views as a ministry for technology, basically, on open source and open APIs, and what initiatives in those regards exist in Mauritius?
We believe strongly in open source, and we are promoting open source. If you look at all the solutions that we are procuring in government, you will see they're very open, and we would prefer to have open source, because it is a community supported solutions, and it allows us to also reduce costs, which is also an important thing, and to have a variety of solutions, and to not vendor locked also. And also it is part of the policy of government to go for open source. For Open API, we are now taking the road of Open API through, in fact, the Info Highway has come in as a data sharing platform, and we have seen that there are certain data like business data, corporate business registration data, that could be introduced and made available for businesses, companies to integrate straight within their solutions without coming to our platforms. And Open API is something that we are trying, and in fact we should be launching very soon a first set of APIs, open APIs, that will be open for people to exploit.
Excellent. Now, speaking of the bus, the Info Highway, who manages that, and who can access it, and what does it serve when it comes to the Civil Status Division of the PMO's office?
Right, the Info Highway, which is the data sharing platform, is managed by our ministry. So our ministry manages it. We have a governance body, however. so that we hold the keys to the system, but we have in the governance body who decides when we can share data and how we share data. What is important is that any ministry or department who wants to share data with another ministry or department, they have to sign an application form, an agreement for sharing of data. And this is why Mr. Ayelou was mentioning about it, where he referred to that any ministry wants to get the data from the civil status office, they have to go through that form. So they have to fill in, and they have also to have the certificate from Data Protection Office to say that they are comply with Data Protection Act. Secondly, once the form has been obtained, the governance body where we examine it together with Civil Status Office, Data Protection Office, the State Law Office, the Ministry of Finance, the Economic Development Board. So all of us, a multi-stakeholder, will look at it and we see whether there is justification to give access. If there is, it is within the law, we give access. Now, last question that you mentioned is also about what data we share. Within the Civil Status Act, there is a provision, if I recall, 8C or 8B, correct me, Mr. Ayelou, where it says there are certain fields like the first name, the surname, name at birth, the gender, the date of birth, date of death, the photograph now also. These are the data that you can share that can be accessible from the civil status system, which is under the control of Mr. Ayelou as a registrar. And Mr. Ayelou has the power also to give, upon very strict requirements, any other fields that he feels that are required for doing business at that institution, which is the public institution. So,
good. William, how many partner agencies or organizations are accessing your civil data under this strict framework?
Yes, we have currently 41 organizations, ministries, department, and I must say that we are the champion here in Mauritius. Most institutions, you know, they're all connected because they all need civil status information data. So,
and it's real time. It's real-time data. Is it real-time, William?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
And we have, yes, and we have. I'm also told that we have I speak under the correction of Mr. Hawabhay, 75 e-services. Nationwide, we have 523 e-services and 67 subscribers. So, and allow me to add that the Info Highway started a few years ago on a pilot project with CSD being the backbone and the Ministry of Social Security. It was announced by the Honorable Prime Minister, and then it has stood the test of time and it's doing very well. We got good price, you know, international level also. It is working, doing very well.
Excellent, excellent. So basically, you would say the cloud is playing an important role. Secure cloud is playing an important role in helping the government of Mauritius conduct its business and serving its citizens.
Exactly.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, if I can just come in. With the data center that we have set up a government cloud, and this is the infrastructure we're serving ministries and departments across Mauritius.
Okay. Any advice, last minute advice before we let you go, Rajneesh? In IT, what do you recommend to government to watch out for? What mistakes they shouldn't make? What things they should look out for?
I think one of the success stories of Mauritius also is that the fact that we are all connected. We have a secure network. So all ministries and departments, we have 200 sites today that are securely connected with us. So that allows us then from the data center to serve everybody, and then it's secured.
Same standard.
And then same standard, and we can then have, and also then we have cybersecurity standards also. We can implement ISMS also and provide the service to everybody. Plus have a data sharing platform that gives value to what you have, everybody has.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so uniformize, give everybody access, give them the ability to talk to each other, and give them the security that they need to feel confident that their business data is not going to be exposed. And now you have basically an ecosystem of data sharing governed by a board and supported by the right measures of security across all the agencies. Mr. Hawabhay, thank you very much. We wish we could spend more time with you, but we're going to move to the banking now. And the first question for Mr. Hitto, what are, in your opinion, the major challenges that you face in the finance and banking sector in Mauritius, and how does identity play a role in addressing those challenges?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Thank you also for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of our experience. I think in terms of the fact that we have the ID, it plays a crucial role as an enabler for financial inclusion. So basically, for example, if you want to open a bank account, you just need your ID and a proof of residence. So once you have this information, and most of our people do have an ID, a unique ID, so it's very, very easy for them to get access to the financial services that are being provided by different institutions.
So you mentioned proof of residence. Recent studies have indicated that proof of residence in Africa was a barrier towards financial inclusion. Do you still insist on the need for an address when you open up a bank account, or can you accept a mobile number?
No, I think in Mauritius it's not a major issue because everyone, either they have the profile address is mainly a utility bill. It could be an electricity or water or anything like that. So this is quite easily available, and everyone do have at least one of these. Or it could be a telephone bill also.
Okay. So it's not a barrier. This regulation is not a barrier to financial inclusion.
No, no.
Do you have any statistics about financial inclusion participation, women, relative men? How do you see your strategy of empowering women to have bank accounts, and also the poor having bank accounts, even though the commercial banks, sometimes they don't want them?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you some figures. These are some figures following, I think it dates back to 2017, but more or less, I think from there, we have made a lot of progress. So around 90% of the population, age 15 and above, do have an account with a bank or a financial institution.
90%?
So, 90%, yeah. So we are one of among the few countries with the highest proportion of formerly banked adults globally. Okay. And when we look at the distribution in terms of gender, in terms of income level, and in terms of educational attainment, there is no major disparity.
There's no disparity among the genders?
No. Just to give you some figures, among the male population, around 93% of male do have an account, and among female it is around 87%. So it's not quite far, and over time this gap has been narrowing over time. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of income distribution, we have a bracket, say the 40% of those who are found in the bottom end. So more than 85% of these people do have a formal account.
Okay.
And for those in the upper 60% category, more than 90% of them do have an account. So here also you can see income is not a barrier. Everyone has access. Everyone do take advantage of the services. In terms of education, also I have some figures. So those who have completed their primary education, or they have a lower education than the primary, so around 90% of these people, they already have an account. Okay. And it's higher for those who have a secondary education. So I don't think education is a barrier also.
Okay. One last question very quickly, since we want to keep going. have you digitized all payments, like G2P, government-to-person payments, and where are you in that project? How important is mobile payment or electronic payment for the government of Mauritius?
No, I think we've made a lot of progress recently. For example, you see, for your tax returns, all your tax returns are being done now. It's 100% should be done electronically. Your payments should be done through the internet banking or other facilities. You have private banks are providing services. You have one, I can just cite one. There's one Juice by a major bank, which through it you can make your payments for the for what you do. And also government, whenever the Mauritius Revenue Authority has to refund to the individuals, this is also done electronically and without much delay.
What about payment of salaries from like civil servant salaries, etc.?
These are done electronically. They are transferred directly to the accounts of the individuals.
And during the COVID crisis, was there any social protection payment that was done to people?
Yes, there was a wage assistance scheme.
Wage assistance.
And the self-employed assistance scheme, two schemes, one for those employed and one for the self-employed. And these were also done by the Mauritius Revenue Authority through the network, and it was done electronically.
Okay. So basically you do have the G2P platform that you can use for any application that you need. Excellent. Yes. Very, very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hitto. We would have loved to stay more with you on this topic, but we've got Dr. Sharmila Valaydon, who is from the Ministry of Health with us. Dr. Valaydon, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been dealing with the COVID situation, so maybe we can start with the position of how identity has played a role in your efforts regarding the containment of COVID and the management of the COVID. Welcome.
Hi, hello to everyone. So thank you again for ID4 Africa for inviting me in. So let me share about what happened, our experience with COVID-19. I'll start a bit with the statistics. So we have actually in Mauritius like 595 confirmed cases, active case of 13. Well, in Mauritius, the ID, as I told you, in the COVID-19 containment, is that here, as everyone has said, the ID is always, it has to be used at any point of time when you attend at hospital. So it starts back at when the first cases of COVID-19 was known and Mauritius went into confinement. Then we started the hotline, but there, however, we didn't use the ID because we were in confinement and people could not go out. So we had to use the hotline as a mean of communication between the doctors and the population. Eventually, we go have the fever clinic we have 5 regional hospitals right now in Mauritius, and each time you go to the 5 regional hospitals, the fever clinics, as we call them, it's a screening system. That's why it's very, very important. So anyone who has symptoms or think they have been in contact with the positive can go there. So there you have to produce your ID. And with the names and IDs, these all got processed to the records so that we can know exactly who, where, and who has the COVID-19 infection. So that's how a bit of how the ID helps out. And mostly, you know, how the COVID-19 control was done mainly through training, if I can say so. There's mainly training of the hotel people, mainly the personnel working at the hospital. It's more about how to control the infection prevention control. And that's it a bit more. There was the training at the hotel done afterwards, after the 1st October, when the borders were opened. I mean, we can say open because it was partially open because still we did the PCR test. But as you can say, the PCR test, when we are taking the people are coming in the quarantines, we get the passport number if they are foreigners, and if are Mauritians, the ID, after which the PCR test on the day 0, 7, and 14 in the quarantine center.
Okay, And so basically ID is the core. You cannot process anybody without a unique ID number that you're tracing and tracking. And was there any trace and track applications? If somebody has been infected, how do you end up tracking whoever this person was in touch with in order to quarantine them?
Yeah, in fact, we were very lucky in Mauritius. We thought fast, so that as the first cases were there were like 5 cases. As they started, we did a contact tracing. The contact tracing, they are a group that, as I told you, it was like a web. We were doctors at the hotline. Then there were swabbers. As soon as people were phoning us about, suspected case, we phoned the swabbers to do just as quick as possible the swabbing. First, we were doing the throat swab. Now we have gone to the nasal swab because of the increased effectivity. So that's it. That's how it was very quick. And the quarantine also helped out. So anyone who was coming from abroad, they had to do the 14 days of quarantine.
Okay.
So that's the incubation period of 14 days.
Okay, so this is a major operation, and hopefully will keep Mauritius safe and free of any COVID in the future. We're going to continue. Thank you so much, Doctor. We appreciate your perspective. I'm going to continue with the discussion with the superintendent of the police, because you have a very ambitious project. I think it's called Safe City. Could you please describe what that project is about? And I'd like to talk to Drudisha about how she sees the data protection and privacy aspect of such an important project.
Good evening, Doctor. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to give a brief overview of the Safe City project. As you must be aware, the Mauritius Police Force is a law enforcement agency of the island of Mauritius. And we are here we are bound by the law to give security and protection to all our citizens. And we are governed by the Police Act 1974, which stipulates that we are there to prevent and detect offenses. The first role of the police is to prevent and detect offenses. So in 2009, we had introduced the CCTV system based on the statistics that certain regions had a lot of crimes. The crime rate was quite high. So with the introduction of the CCTV surveillance system in this region, we noticed that the crime rate had completely reduced. And this gave the idea of introducing better technological instrument and better cameras, intelligent cameras. This is how the Safe City project came into line. And we signed the contract in 2017. And this project, the Safe City project, is a complete ecosystem where we have a lot of systems included in one project. Like we have the CCTV surveillance cameras, the video surveillance, we have the traffic surveillance, we have an emergency response management system, which is a 99 hotline call, where people are in distress, they can call us, and we can locate them. We have a system called the location-based system. We can locate from where the people in distress are calling us. And we have got a main command center and regional sub-command centers from where we can monitor all these cameras that have been placed throughout the island.
And do you plan on implementing face recognition into these CCTV cameras?
One of the components of this project is facial recognition, which is under implementation. We have not yet done the testing, but just to add, Mrs. Madhub is here. The project, when we did the project, we have followed, we have been in line with the Data Protection Act. So the Mauritius Police Force, the Data Protection Office has issued a code of practice in relation to this project, where we follow all the guidelines so that we don't violate the rights of the public.
Hold on to that thought. This is quite interesting. Drudisha, what does the code of practice do? What does it dictate?
Yes. So Joseph, this is a very important document, the Code of Practice, because it is binding on the Mauritius Police Force.
It's binding.
Any infringement, it's binding. And any infringement of the Code of Practice is just like you're infringing a piece of law. There is no distinction here. So this is the first important element that we should note with this Code of Practice. And let me put it this way, the beauty of this Code of Practice is that now the date is 30th of October 2020 that it came into force. Yes, 30th of October 2020. And it has got many elements, like 10 pages in this document, where we range from all the obligations that are imposed on the Mauritius Police Force with regard to data protection safeguards, and what are the responsibilities of all the officers involved in the process, what security measures should be put into place, who are the players, who are the actual targets, and basically everything about data protection is more or less covered in this Code of Practice. There have been certain sections of the DPA that have been exempted from application by the Prime Minister, which is his prerogative, and we respect that. But I must say the Data Protection Act as a whole finds its application in the Safe City Camera project. And
can you share the document, Bridisha? Can you share the document? Is it public?
Problem. It's available on our website, and I will definitely share this document with ID4 Africa. And for me, it's a very far-reaching document with very big responsibilities on the Mauritius Police Force, and being issued by the Data Protection Office represents the regulator's responsibility as well.
I think we would like to promote this document so that there's awareness of it, because the issue is happening anywhere in the world. Right now, CCTV cameras with face recognition are popping up everywhere in the world, and people are looking for code of conduct, that code of practice that govern these, that are consistent with mature data protection acts. So if you can share it with us, and if anybody who's interested in it, contact ID for Africa, and we'd be happy to share it. But obviously, you can also go directly to the Data Protection Office in Mauritius website and download it from there. This is definitely very, very positive development, because we believe that responsible deployment of face recognition can build safety and security for the population, instead of preventing them from benefiting from advances in technology for fear that it would violate people's privacies. So this is a mature approach for delivering the safety, but at the same time, the honest majority don't need to fear or worry about their privacy being invaded. So, Superintendent, that's a wonderful project. Good luck. We would love to hear more about it in the future. Hopefully we'll bring you back and tell us about how face recognition is working for you. So thank you so much. I want to move on to Mr. Ramlall from the Passport and Immigration Office. Mr. Ramlall, how do you participate in the identity ecosystem? You're producing a document, an important document, which is the passport. In immigration, clearly you have control of identity at the border. Describe how identity plays a role in your business practices in Mauritius.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Well, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to organize the Passport and Immigration Officer. Well, before answering to your question, the Passport and Immigration Office is a branch of the Mauritius Police Force and works under the aegis of the Prime Minister's Office, as well as the Commissioner of Police. The Passport and Immigration Office is a sole authority in Mauritius, which is empowered to provide passport and immigration services. Okay. Well, the services provided by the Passport and Immigration Office are the issuance of Mauritius passport, travel documents to citizens, issuance of visa to non-citizens, issuance of residence permit, occupation permit to eligible non-citizens who want to work, invest, or retire in Mauritius. And also we have the issuance of premium visa newly implemented to eligible non-citizens who intends to stay in Mauritius for a maximum period of 1 year as a tourist or professional willing to come with his or her family and carry out his business or work remotely from Mauritius. And lastly, I can say controlling and regulating entry and exit at border control. Okay, well, one of the core services of the Passport and Immigration Office is the issuance of Mauritius passport. Okay, the Mauritius passport is governed by laws. Okay, I can say governed by laws. The Passport and Immigration Officer may issue, renew, or endorse a passport to any citizen of which who satisfies such conditions as may be prescribed by the law. I have just said the issuance of Mauritius passport is governed by the Passport Act. Here, the laws in Mauritius, Passport Act, Passport Regulations, Constitution of Mauritius, Mauritius Citizenship Act, and Civil Code of Mauritius. In addition, the Data Protection Act. Okay, but regarding the documents that are required for the application of a Mauritius passport are already spelled out in the law. For instance, so for the application of a Mauritius passport, the basic documents that we will need is the Mauritius birth certificate of the citizen. We require the national identity card, Mauritius national identity card, and related documents where applicable. I wish to add also, a Mauritius passport is issued to citizens of Mauritius who are either by birth, the person having been born here in Mauritius, or by descent, or by naturalization or registration, or by adoption.
Okay, so basically, you are a consumer of identity, but also you're a producer of identity as well. And
Yes.
if there are any issues of investigation, like if there's doubt about a case that William gets, Mr. Ayelou gets, I assume you participate in offering an opinion about the status of that case?
Yes, of course. If in case of any doubt, we have to confirm the authority concerned, for instance, the civil status office about the birth of the person. If we yes, there is a communication between Passport and Immigration Office and other authorities also.
Right. So what I've heard throughout all the people who've just spoken is that, in fact, every single one of them mentioned the Data Protection Act. I mean, it sounds like, you know, that's become really, really a key. And that's a message that I leave everybody with, that not only do you have to respect the law, but you have to respect the right law. And in a modern society where life is based on data, the Data Protection Act becomes a central core law that every practice, whether it's passport immigration or whether it's banking, whether it's health, all of it have to be respectful of that law. I just want to let the public know there have been a lot of questions. We're going to bring them on. If you want to be on the community voices, we're extending this session as usual. I want to go to elections, and then I want to come back to the full panel and close through some community voices where people might want to express their opinions. I still have a segment that I want to conduct with Rudisha regarding the new law and its relation with the European GDPR. Okay, Mr. Ramlall, thank you so much. Apologies for being short because we're short on time. But like I said, we hope to bring more of what you're doing to the forefront in a future episode. Thank you. Mrs. Seewoo from the Electoral Commission, thank you for being with us. Clearly, identity and unique identity plays a role in democracy. It's the foundation of democracy. So describe to us, and unmute yourself, and describe to us, please, how does the Mauritius identity practices for elections take place?
Thank you, Dr. Atik, for this enriching session. Hello, everyone. Well, the MNIC, the Mauritian Identity Card, plays a pivotal role in the electoral process. Why so? Once a citizen reaches the age of 18, that person is entitled to have a national identity card. This happens to be the same age for a person to be entitled to be registered to vote at an election. Unlike India, another Commonwealth jurisdiction, the Electoral Commission of India issue a voter identity card. But Mauritius, we rely and we make full use of the Mauritian identity card. Why so? because it has all the features that we need of a person to appear on the register of electors. The right to vote is guaranteed under the Constitution, also is provided for in the ICCPR, that is the International Covenant for the Civil and Political Rights. Yet, to be able to safeguard, to protect this very right to vote, we need some mechanism to make sure that the right person, the specific individual, is given a ballot paper when they come to vote. And how so? We have provisions in our electoral laws which cater that when a person comes to vote, that person must bring a proof, must produce a proof of identity to obtain a ballot paper. Now, amongst proof of identity, we have the MNIC, which is one of the main proof of identity, which is most popularly used by voters in Mauritius. With this, we have to be able to vote, that person must produce MNIC. Yet, before that, there is the registration of electors, which comes first. We use the MNIC to be able to register the person. That is, the person must produce the MNIC, wherein we have the information such as basic information like names, like we have the gender of the person, the full family name, which I mean, and the gender, and we have the MNIC number and the date of birth of that person. We take these information to register the person. Of course, the address will be there. We ask the person for the address, and given that Mauritius does the house-to-house inquiry, which is a door-to-door inquiry, so we have the address, we ascertain the address then and there. We take these informations and we register the person, and we compile the register of electors. Having done so, this very register of electors is used now for the election process. Now, how do we use the MNIC again? When a person comes to the voting station, the polling station, voting center, however we call it, comes to cast his or her vote, that person must produce a proof of identity. Mostly, they produce the MNIC. Well, they can produce the passport and the birth pass, but the MNIC is most universally used in Mauritius. They produce the MNIC. Now, once they produce this document, the presiding officer has to verify whether the person presenting that said MNIC is verily the same person who is in front of him or her, asking for a ballot paper. And having verified this first step, now the person has to verify the information therein, that is, the name of the person appearing on the NIC and appearing on the register of electors. The advantage of using the MNIC for registration process is that we get the accurate name of the person. That's one of the advantage. Once they cross-verify this, they cross-verify the MNIC number, which is a unique number, as it has been explained earlier in this session. We verify the date of birth. Date of birth can be identical for many people, but having the MNIC number in full is very specific. So this is one of the advantages for us to eliminate double entry in the voters register.
Why do you need a door-to-door process? Explain that. Some people are asking, what does it play in the electoral process, this door-to-door canvassing?
Mauritius is, I think, one of the only country in the African continent still doing the door-to-door process. Well, the door-to-door started right when we had the Representation of the People Act dated 1958. The act dates that far. The process, the tendency in Mauritius was that we used to visit people to verify where they live, to have the actual address. Ascertain the very address of the person, where that person lives, and register all the members of the family then and there. The tendency is that people have got used to that. So we are still maintaining. Yes.
Hold on one second to that thought, because in fact, you're capturing data that's quite useful to create a national population register. I mean, William and Mr. Gopaul, if you combined, because you have the unique ID number in both, if you combined in the civil status data and the electoral data, that address, you're going to have a national population register with the address verified by the door-to-door canvassing process. Is that integration, backward integration, where you took the electoral data back into your data, being enriching and it's being done, or you have laws that prevent that?
Well, yes, okay. Yes.
Mr. Gopaul. Unmute, Mr. Gopaul.
No, there is no law preventing the use of electoral data. We can use it. I don't know whether Mr. Ayelou can add on that.
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay?
yes.
Well, in fact, there is a close collaboration between Civil Status Division and the Electoral Commission Office. We provide data, but in return, we do not take data from the Electoral Commission Office.
Right.
The only thing that maybe we can consider is to have recent address, because in many cases, citizens making the national identity card, sometimes when they move to any other part of the country, they do not notify us, although it is mandatory. They have the MNIC Act. Maybe on that score, if there is a collaboration for us to update our database, the MNIC database, we can have recent address from the Electoral Commissioner.
Right,
Office.
there is value in that. I mean, there is value in that, assuming that Rhodesia is not going to be upset that there is a violation of the act.
No, not at all. It's just an address, and I guess that also protects the citizen to have the exact address which shows where he lives, and it's actually a protection. Why should we go against it? Yes.
Madame Seewoo, maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration with Mr. Ayelou. That would be wonderful after this session.
So I think that in fact we have discussed upon this updating of data on the CPD, and this is one possible avenue of collaboration with the Electoral Commission Office.
Excellent, excellent, very good, very good. Madam Seewoo, if you have any concluding remarks about the identity in the Electoral Commission, I know we're asking you to be rapid because we're running out of time, because I have one more subject I want to address with data protection, which is an important subject. So any closing remarks?
Definitely. Thank you, Doctor. Using the MNIC gives us lots of advantage, such as we happen to eliminate the double entry of voters on the register because with the unique NIC. At the same time, we also happen to eliminate the issue of impersonation, which may have arisen in previous elections prior to introducing the MNIC. That is, people cannot come and impose themselves for someone else and vote in Europe of that person. So this is a great advantage that we have since we have introduced the MNIC for the 2014 National Assembly elections. As a concluding remark, I would say that MNIC has become a sine qua non in the voting process, whether it is in the registration process or whether it is for the voting process. And it has helped us immensely to clean our register and to produce a credible register of electors. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that insight onto your practices. We've got one person from the Community Voices. Parmesh, could you please introduce yourself, say who you are with and where you're coming from?
Yes, good evening, everyone. And good evening, Dr. Atik, for this wonderful session. And good evening to my local peers here in Mauritius. And thank you all for all these clarifications. Well, I, a senior solution architect from having an IT background and working in one of the major firms on the island, and we deal a lot with data. And actually, I'm also a data scientist and working locally here. It's a good initiative, and whatever the Data Protection Office has taken on board, it's a very good initiative. But still, we have to be careful with the constitutional right of people. It's a primary predicament for, for the local population. We have to be careful with this, and this is a right that we have acquired, of the independence and of the. It's a long history behind that. So to cut short, it's just that everything is very much appropriate what the government has put in place and what previous governments also had started, except that I could see that there is the lambda Mauritian doesn't find they don't really see the criticality of that ID card. And the fact that they have a tendency to give it out, they have a tendency to share it, they have a tendency to give it to someone else. And you know, nowadays in technology, you already have a biometric photograph on that card. And I suppose that this has to be taken into account by the authority and make sure that this biometric photo, I don't know whether there will be another issuance of another ID card on the island. I'm sure it will happen. And also the minutia on the chip, it's also quite, I don't know how, maybe if Mr. Hawabhay would be here, he could have confirmed this. The minutia on the chip, whether it is traceable, people are asking questions because we talk to people, we talk to local population, we talk to clients, we talk to a lot of people around. Whether this chip, because chip, you know, can be traceable, chip can be easily located, and through, you know, RFID or NFC enabled technologies. So all these things, I think the Mauritius national ID should attend to these questions and clarify this to the local community. Maybe, you know, I don't know. They are doing a good work by bringing awareness, but awareness mostly on the general terms of the importance of the ID. But
Yeah,
I think we need to go more into technical side.
More technical. Okay, thank you, Parmesh. Anybody care to respond to Parmesh's point, which is valid everywhere in the world? I mean, this is an important issue that we keep all dealing with. Anybody?
Can I, Dr. Atik? Can I
Mr. Gopaul, can you unmute?
Well,
No, it's,
welcome the suggestion of Mr. Parane. Now, taken note of his suggestion. We're going to discuss on that. All suggestions are welcome, and wherever it is possible, we are going to take action.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Joseph,
yes,
sorry.
Dradisha, yes.
Please pass on to Mr. Hawabhay, because this issue has been raised before, and we
Yes.
have tackled this issue. So it's not a new issue, and I guess
Mr. Hawabhay, operator, bring Mr. Hawabhay to the panel. Yeah, Mr. Hawabhay, please get on the panel.
Yeah, got my video. Right, thank you, Dr. Atik and Mr. Parmesh. Well, the ID card does not have anything for traceability. There is nothing that you can use to be able to do, to try to find out whether there is GPS on it or whether you can locate anybody. So the card has data, true, and the data is secured because it is also under password. It's very much an encrypted data also, and it's protected. So you can't just read it even through IC or whatever, because people have tried, and this is not possible, right? So we do not have, and the photograph is just a photograph. We have not done any measurements. If you want to do facial recognition, you need to do a lot of measurements on it. This is not part of the solution that we have. So rest assured, our data is just plain data that we have from the database. This is what is stored in the card. And the minutia is not accessible, because if you want to read it also, you need an SDK, you need a card reader. And this is the only place that you can have it is only at the ID card centers.
On the card.
Right.
Okay,
so
excellent. Excellent. Okay, operator, bring the rest of the board back for a goodbye closing. But just to say goodbye to the audience. But I'd like, while we're bringing that, I'd like to engage with Dradisha a little bit more, because the data, the personal data protection, as we've seen today, plays a central role in every aspect of Mauritius's journey toward digital development and towards, building the digital Mauritius 2030. Now, Dradisha, why the need for new legislation on data protection? I mean, why you had a good one before, and now after GDPR came out, you found yourself in a position where you wanted to update the data protection law. Why did you need to do that?
Yes, Joseph, I think as you have seen that we are quite futuristic in our approaches. We've been very innovative, and we wanted to be innovative as well in the data protection arena. And not only innovative, but very ambitious as well, because if you look at the General Data Protection Regulation, it came into force in May 2018. And we adopted a legislation which came into force in January 2018, that is some months before the EU GDPR actually came into force. Why we did it that way, and actually we've been successful in getting it through cabinet on a racing time, on a race, and we actually achieved it because actually we are the first country in the world who has a data protection legislation which has aligned itself with the GDPR. Then came the UK sometime after. So that credit goes to Mauritius, it goes to our office here who has made all the efforts possible to be able to win a race. You might say it's competition, but actually we are very proud of this achievement.
We are actually proud of you for having been the first African country and first country in the world. But why is GDPR relevant for Mauritius? I get that question a lot by African countries to say Europe is Europe. Why should we use GDPR as a standard for us? Could you please explain that?
Yes, definitely. Why is the EU GDPR right now the standard? Why is it across the world the standard? Because of its extraterritoriality application. That is, EU data being resided anywhere in the world is a threat for the country where it is actually residing, because it involves that administrative sanctioning under the GDPR, which relates to 2% extending to 4% of the turnover of that organization, as administrative fine is actually what an organization has to think when he is actually treating, collecting, processing EU personal information that is about EU citizens. So we were legitimately very scared, and we wanted to align our data protection framework with the GDPR to ensure that our businesses in Mauritius are protected. And that has been a very big guarantee that we could give to our investors and also the citizens involved in relation to data protection principles, that we are ahead and we're giving them maximum protection in terms of data protection.
Let me ask you a delicate question, but it's an important question because everybody has to go through it. I imagine you're working on the question of adequacy right now.
Yes.
Where are you in that process? How confident are you? Perhaps you can explain to the audience what adequacy means, so that, and explain when do you think you can achieve it?
Okay. So basically, yes, when we actually amended the Data Protection Act to align it with EU GDPR, our main concern has been the EU adequacy. Why is the EU adequacy so important for a country, not only Mauritius, is that you can actually make the safe flow of data transfer between Mauritius and Europe a really flexible operation, which is not the case right now, because Mauritius is not on the safe list, as you know, with regard to EU adequacy. It's not only Mauritius, but if you look at the list, there are actually very scarcely countries who are actually EU safe listed as adequate countries. So our main concern in Mauritius has been that we want to be on the safe list. We don't want our businesses to suffer. And that's why we're moving in the EU adequacy project. And I can tell you, we have already launched consultancy procurement exercise to actually nominate a consultant who will make a report, an assessment on the Data Protection Act in Mauritius, which will be sent to the EU for his validation and to see whether they accept it or not. But if you look at the Data Protection Act, we have taken every precaution to ensure that all the essential principles in the GDPR are reflected in the Data Protection Act here. So basically, I can say we stand a 95% chance of getting EU adequacy, subject to whatever they will also require us to do. And we are open to do that.
This is really, really an important project. We wish you luck in it. The European Data Protection Board last week has issued a ruling that gave me some pause and gave me some concern about African countries, because basically they said that the Commission adequacy decision should contain any findings regarding the existence of rules adopted in this country intended to limit any interference with the fundamental rights of a person whose data is transferred from the European Union to a third country. So in a way, they may interpret the Constitution as not giving enough absolute rights, and they may object, just like they would object to many other countries. I think this is not a problem for Mauritius. It's going to be a problem for everybody, and it's going to be a problem for Europe as well.
Yes, I do appreciate the point, the constitutional aspect. But Joseph, we have studied so much adequacy elements. I can tell you that Convention 108 is actually a very good starting point that we can use to defeat also certain of these concerns. Because as you know, Mauritius is the first African country who has ratified Convention 108 since October 2016. Again, the first African country who has ratified Convention 108 plus in September 2020. I don't see any, sorry to say that with bluntness, any other African country who has done so much of effort to be able to ensure that we are actually protecting people's data here, and we mean business. If you look at the data protection framework, it's criminal in nature. It's even more serious as sanctioning here in Mauritius than administrative fines that are being provided under the GDPR. So we prosecute people here, and it's very serious. But to say that the Constitution is actually, let's say, a ban to all the other considerations regarding adequacy, that would be a fallacy. Why? Because so many constitutions in the world, including European constitutions, do not have a right to privacy. And yet, on part. So we can use that argument as well to say, how can you accept? We also have ratified the convention. We also aiming in that direction. So for me personally, my very personal opinion, we can fight back that argument.
And we'll be watching, because that's an important topic, not just for you, Mauritius, but for the rest of Africa. Unfortunately, we've reached a point where even our extended time has run out. If there is one message that we're going to leave our audience with, our attendees with, is the fact that legal frameworks for identity systems matter. Data protection is going to become a paramount consideration. Don't take it as a second afterthought. Take it as something that's very, very primary. Before you even launch your ID system, you gotta be thinking about data protection and building the trust of the population. Because if they see you serious about how you treat their data, you are going to gain their trust and therefore build a successful ID system. Mr. Gopaul, please accept our sincere thank you on behalf of ID for Africa movement to your government. And please pass my sincere thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister. And of course, I'd like to thank all of your team members, all of the panelists who've contributed today. 2.5 hours have passed very quickly. And that just shows that it's not the size of the country that matters. In fact, it is how developed and how sophisticated you have developed your ecosystem. And so we're proud to have featured you in this episode. We've learned a lot of lessons, and I'm sure this record on YouTube will be viewed multiple times by people who are looking for nuggets of wisdom. So thank you again. And if you would like to say any closing remarks, the floor is yours.
Let me, in the name of the government of Mauritius, and in the name of all the panelists present here, let me take this opportunity to thank you very much for having given us this opportunity to share with you some of our best practices. As you rightly said, there are two paramount things that we must consider. The Data Protection Act is of paramount importance to build confidence if we need to bring a good identity framework in a country. Let me also take this opportunity. Once Dr. Sharmila helped us to get rid of COVID, let me take this opportunity to invite you to Mauritius. And I'm sure Mr. Ramlall will do his best to give you a premium visa for this.
Thank you. Thank you. I would definitely take you up on this offer. I look forward to visiting the island and to experiencing your hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much. This is the end. ID for Africa will be back in 2 weeks for another session on the livecast series. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. and your team.
Thank you very much.
Yes.